we're going to do the pink butterfly with the blue background. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to sketch out our butterfly so that we can get our little road map and placement. So I'm going to find the center of my canvas as best as I can. And once I do, so about here, an easy way to find the center of your canvas, about the center, is to take your fingers and kind of meet them in and kind of mark that, and then take your fingers and meet them in, but you got to make sure they're going the same speed. But that's about the center of my canvas. You can just kind of eyeball it, and just a little above the center I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a circle for his head, and then underneath there I'm going to start to make his body. So I'm just making a couple little curved lines here. I'm going to do a smaller, it's going to get kind of thinner as we go to the bottom. And that is going to be his body. I'm not going to worry about his antennas right now. What I'm going to worry about instead is his wings. So what I'm going to do when I do his wings is I'm going to think about the shape of a heart. I want them to be a little bit equal on both sides, so I want to try and stay away from the edge of the canvas. So I marked it so that I don't go further than these lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start behind his head. I'm going to think of the shape of a heart. I'm going to turn my canvas this way. And I'm going to make this side of the heart a little bit smaller, because when you think of a butterfly, typically their bottom wings are smaller than their top wings. So you've got one wing on this side. Now we want to try and repeat this shape the best that we can on this side. Now for me, it's easier for me to try and go and flip my canvas over and get this angle. And what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and not go lower than here. So if I were to make a straight line across here, I want to not go past this line. So I'm going to start here, and again, we're trying to go a heart shape and we're trying not to go out here. And if you look, this part goes right to the center, so I know that I want it to come in somewhere near here. This side's not too deep, so I want to keep it similar. If I look now, it's looking pretty good. I'll curve this out just a little bit more, but that's looking pretty good. So then I'm going to go back around, and again, not go past this line. I'm going to start, I'm not going to go higher than this line. It's looking pretty good. So that's what you want to pay attention to. You want to try and keep these the same height. You want to try and keep the space equal distance. You want to keep these the same. So you can play around with it a little bit until you get the shape that you like. Remember, at any time, if we're going too fast, or if you really want to play with the shape of something or really work on something, just hit pause and you'll be able to come back as you're ready. Go ahead and erase that line. I think I'm pretty pleased with it though. I think it's alright. So what I'm going to do is now I've got the main shape of my butterfly here. So I'm going to start by painting my background. And what I'm going to do is make a little bit of blue. Now I've got dark blue here, but I want it to be a light blue. I probably have way too much blue here, so you really don't need to have this much. So So I'm going to take some of this blue, not a lot because I want it to be lighter, and I'm going to take a lot of this white and I'm going to mix it. And that's still pretty dark. So I'm going to mix even more. Mix it in really, really good. Remember, when we're mixing, we're doing that on our plates. When we're blending, we're typically doing that on the canvas. So we're mixing a blue right about here. Make sure you guys can see that. And you can do it as light or as dark as you want. This is just what I'd like to do. But I really want to mix in those colors here. What I'm going to do, I can see that I've got some other color on here, which means I have a little color left over. So I want to go ahead and I want to clean it off because I don't want to get any streaks in here. So it's a good thing to pay attention to as you're going. I'm going to dry it off really good. Hopefully it's a little bit better here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this mix of blue here and I'm just going to start covering the background. And as you go, you can keep adding some more white if you want it to be even lighter. Or you can add some more blue if you want it to be darker. But remember, when you come up to these lines, you want to turn your brush so that you're not going the full width. You're holding your brush straight out, you're barely pressing down, and you're getting a nice clean line that way. Now typically I pay attention to which way my brush strokes are going, but for this it's kind of like a little sky, so we don't have to worry too much about which way it goes. I like the fact that I can see some darker blues with some lighter blues here. It's making me pretty happy. And again, remember, as we go around, you want to go ahead and use that side of the brush, that flat part. And then you can see I had it pretty dark here, so I can just add just a touch of white to my brush and then just blend that right in. So if that happens to you, no worries, don't stress. Just go ahead and blend it right back in. Remember, in order to blend, both colors have to be wet. If they're not going to mix together. You're just going to see one color on top of another. So if your goal is to make them blend together and become one color, you need them both to be wet. Now when you're doing accents, you want that color to be dry, and then you go ahead and add the other color over it so that you can really see that color pop. In this case, we're not talking about accents, making things pop, we're making things blend in and just be kind of soft looking. And again, you guys add however light or dark you want. Go ahead and keep going into all those nooks and crannies, the small areas. If you can't get in there with your big brush, don't be afraid to go in with your smaller brush. Just make sure that your bristles are together so So you can roll it in your paint so that you can get a nice smooth line. If your bristles aren't together on that smaller brush, you're going to have a harder time. So you want to make sure to do that. And then remember, as you turn this canvas around, try not to grab it in the wet spots. Otherwise you're going to get a big old thumbprint. And if you do, no worries, just go ahead and add paint and paint it right back in. Remember, as you go to those outlines, you get those angles with this brush. So we've got that background painted here. So I'm going to go ahead and clean up this brush. Dry it off really, really good. And if you still see some color on there, you want to make sure you clean it out even more so that you don't have any problems after. So then what I'm going to do, I'll make sure my brush is nice and dry so that no drips come. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paint in my wings, which I'm going to make a light pink. So I'm going to use just a touch of this red and a lot of this white because I want it to be a nice soft pink. So I'm going to use more white than I do red. It doesn't mean you have to use all of your white. You just want more white than you have red. And then once I find the color that I want, I'm still using this big brush, I'm just going to go ahead and start painting this color on here. Now I can go ahead and see how wide I can get my brush by pushing down as hard as I can. That's how wide my brush is going to get. That's okay when I'm doing this big space like this, because we want to fill this space. Now what's important to remember when we're using this brush and we're putting all of this paint on is that we have a smooth surface, so we don't want giant thick lines of paint. Like you can see right here, there's a thick line. So I'm going to make sure that I spread that out really, really good, because we're going to want to draw on this and paint over this and all that good stuff. So we want it to be nice and dry. And the craft acrylics that we're using don't take long to dry, but the more we spread that paint out, the quicker it's going to be that we can get started on the next part. So we're going to go ahead here, and just like before we did with the blue, we're going to use this flat angle here, and we're going to spin that brush so that we get a nice straight edge around here, just like that. So we've got one wing painted. I'm going to look here, and based on the angle and the light, I can tell what's wet and what's dry. If there's a shine or a glisten, then it's wet, and if there's not, then it's pretty safe to say that it's dry. So my wing is very, very wet. My background is almost dry already. So as I spin this, I'm going to look for my dry spots. Right here is nice and dry, so I can hold on to this edge and not worry that I'm going to thumbprint it. Now again on this wing, I'm going to turn my brush so that I can give it a nice little outline here. Remember, with all of these brushes, the harder that we press, the wider our line is going to be. And it's easy to add paint, but it's harder to take it away. So we want to take our time and we want to go slow so that we're only putting the paint where we intended to put the paint. And again, smooth out all those thick lines so that this can dry and we can move on to our next step. Remember, the harder that I press, the wider the drip. So if something like this happens, what you're gonna do is simply tap it away. So it's on my paper towel now, so there's no drip there now. And I'm gonna make sure my brush is all nice and cleaned out. And then I'm gonna dry it off. Make sure it's nice and dry. And then what I'm going to do, I've still got some paint on here, so I'm going to spread that around a little bit. And then I'm going to come back in. Now normally you'd wait for it to dry, but the problem wasn't that it was going on a different color. The problem was just that it was dripping with water. So we didn't have to wait for it to dry, we just needed to blot that excess water away, and then we can go back over it with our paint again. You can see right here I've got a little bit of a thick line. So I'm going to just kind of touch it and pull it towards the wing. And that's going to make that line disappear without giving me too much trouble. Got to be really careful doing it though. So now we've got our wings painted in. So we're going to let that dry. So while we're waiting for that to dry, we're going to go ahead and we're going to paint in his body. So we're going to clean out this brush. Tap it around on the bottom of that cup, wipe it on the side, gets the excess water out, and then squeeze it dry. Make sure you're squeezing this part dry too, because sometimes that's where that water sneaks in, is that this part got wet and then it drips down here slowly but surely, and then when you least expect it, comes out of nowhere. So that brush is nice and cleaned off. So what I'm going to do, so I'm going to take a little bit of white, a little bit more than that, and then I'm going to take just a small amount of black. Black goes really far. We don't want it to be too dark. See, I just took that small amount and look at how dark it got already. So we don't need it to be a lot here. And you're going to make sure it's mixed in really nicely, just like that. And then we can go ahead and we can take our small brush, we can roll it right into that paint so that it gives us a fair amount. Now again, if I steady myself on my canvas, I want to make sure that I'm doing it where the paint is not wet. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to outline this. And then go ahead and fill it in. Now we don't want to scrub with this small brush, but we can fill in this small space. If this was too much larger, we wouldn't even want to use this brush to fill in this spot. Like on this body, we're going to go ahead and we're going to outline it so that it's easier to fill in. But we're not going to use this brush to actually fill it in. Got some thick paint there, so I'm going to make sure I spread that around. So So then I can go ahead and use this brush so that it's ready for next time. Dry it off. And then I'm taking that medium brush that I had mixed that gray with, and I'm just filling it right in here. Just like that. So there, that's all nice and filled in. Now, my wings are almost dry, but my blue is definitely dry up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the antennas. So I'm going to clean out this brush, tap it around on that bottom, wipe it on the side, and then get it nice and dry here so it's ready to go. And then I'm going to make a little bit more gray. I don't need a lot, but I want to make enough. And when we're doing this brush, when we're using it for an outline or for something thin like this, we want to add just a little bit of water. Now I don't have that much paint, so I want to take just a little bit of water and drip it in there. I want to mix it in really, really good. And I don't want it to be too thin. If it's too thin, it's going to drip all over my painting. So I want to use just a small amount, just enough so that my paint glides. Now if I hold up my brush, I can see that it's not dripping. I'm feeling pretty safe, but since I did put water on my brush, I'm going to wipe it off, make sure it's nice and dry, and then I'm going to roll it into that paint. Now I know that I don't have any extra water up here that's going to drip down because I took the time to dry it off. And then I'm going to think about his antennas, and I'm going to start with a curly cue all the way up here, and then I'm going to look and I'm going to make sure that I come down as straight as I can. I'm going to turn it around like this, and that might help me get a better angle. And I'm not pressing very hard. The harder that I press, the wider my line's going to be. So you can tell I didn't press very hard here, and then I pressed harder as I came down. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to try and stay matched up with this line as much as I can. And then I'm going to come around, and I'm going to start here, and I'm going to curly cue it back and match that right up. Got two little lines just like that. I'm going to go ahead and rinse off that brush. Make sure it's nice and dry. Now my wings are definitely nice and dry. If I look at my angles, I can see that my body is still wet by the shimmer that I've got there. There's a little reflection, but my wings are nice and dry. So we're going to do some detail on the wings now. And whatever we do on one wing, we're going to follow and do the same thing on the other wing. Now again, it's important. Turn your canvas if that helps you to get the same angle on each side. Do whatever you need to do to make yourself comfortable with it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix a pink, but I'm going to mix a darker pink. So I'm just adding just a little bit of red into my white. And then what's important for this part is I am going to use my medium brush, but see how it's nice and flat there? You can see how it's thin. I can see a pretty straight line there. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use that. I'm not going to press hard with this brush. I'm going to hold it down real close, but I'm not going to press down real hard. And I'm simply going to give an inside line to my heart shape. I'm going to come around, and I'm even spinning my brush in my hand as I go. And there's my first line. Then I'm going to go ahead. This is where spinning my canvas comes in handy. And I'm going to start here. And again, I'm not pressing hard. I'm trying to stay the same distance away from the outside part of the wing. And I'm going to have this come together in a V. So I've got a little outline just like that. Now if you look close, you can see some little white marks in there. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to fill those in to make sure that my canvas looks nice and finished. Just like that. Then I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Whatever I do on this side, I want to keep symmetrical, the same on the other side. So again, I'm going to start and make sure I've got that thin, flat brush going. I'm going to barely press down, and I'm going to try my best to stay an equal distance away from the outside of the wing as I can. Okay? And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'll make sure I have enough paint. Again, I want to fill in these white spaces here. So then I'm going to start here. I'm trying to keep an equal distance apart. And then what I want to do is I want to try and meet up at the same spot on both sides. So they meet up kind of at the same spot there. So now what we can do is make even a darker pink. So add just a little bit more red again. And again, whatever I do on one side, I'm going to do on the other. And I'm going to just add some decorations. Now this again is where you get to kind of do it how you want, but this is how I'm going to do mine. So I made a shape there. I'm going to try and make the same type of shape. Try and make it similar size on this side. Remember, we're not robots. We're not going to be perfect, so don't stress yourself out if it's not exactly the same. And I'm going to make a little one here and a little one here. Fill those in like that. And then I'm going to tip this one down. So you can see this one's going up, this one's going straight out, this one's coming down. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to try and make it about the same size. Just like that. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rinse out this brush. And make sure it's nice and dry. And if you're still seeing a lot of red on there, go ahead and rinse it out again. You want to make sure that you got it pretty well cleaned out. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my small brush. I'm going to make sure that it's to a point, and I'm going to take that red again, similar to what we just used. Doesn't have to be exactly the same, but similar. Or I'm going to roll my paintbrush in it. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make dots. Now I'm not pressing hard. I'm trying to stay equally spaced and the same size, but you don't have to be perfect. Remember, we're not robots. We're not always going to make the exact same thing, and that's okay. We're trying our best. And that's all that matters. As long as you're trying your very, very best, you're going to do awesome. Remember, at any time, if you need to take a break, if your arm's getting tired, you can just hit pause, shake it out a little bit, and then start again. I'm going to go all the way to that inside. So then I'm going to try and do the same thing on the other side. Now you don't have to do the exact same amount of dots, but you don't want to do like 50 dots on one side and 3 dots on the other side. So you want to try and space them equally apart, just the way you did on the other side, just so that they're somewhat similar. If you can get the same amount, and you can get them spaced out equally, that's going to be fantastic. But don't go crazy over it. Just try and keep them equally spaced. And about the same size. Go all the way up, just like that. So we've got some little details on there. And I'm going to take, not even rinsing off that brush, just going to roll it right in the red here. And I'm just going to make a little bit of a darker line in each of these. Again, just another little detail here. Remember, the harder that I press, the wider this line is going to be. And whatever I do on this side, I want to try and do on this side. I'm going to give this brush a really good rinse out. And then dry it off nice. Then I'm going to mix a little bit more light blue. I'm not going to need a ton. But I want to make some circles. So I made my brush here. I'm going to take this small brush again. And I'm just going to go ahead and in between here, I'm just going to make some circles. And I'm going to follow this line right here. Just like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing, just little circles. Just like that. And again, whatever I do to this side, I'm going to do to this side. So this time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm going to try and make 5 circles. And what I want to try and have happen is this one line up here. So what I can do is I can make this one here and then fit the next circle in between, and that'll help to make them end at the same spot, so that way they are even. So the same here. Let's start it with this one, come over, we've got 5 again. Right here, and then I want to see this one ends down here. So I want to try and keep it around the same area, and the same size there, just like that. I'm going to rinse off that brush. I'm going to let those polka dots dry for a minute here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean out this brush. I don't want paint to stay on our brushes because that'll end up getting all stuck and make our brushes kind of stiff and not very easy to work with. So I'm going to make sure it's nice and dried off. And what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to get that flat point here. And I'm going to go ahead and dip just in my white, no other color. I'm just going to do some fun details here. So I'm going to make a curved line in on this side of the butterfly. And then I'm going to make a curved line in the opposite way on this side of the butterfly. Just like that. And then I'm going to follow this curve. And I'm going to follow this curve. And I'm keeping it pretty symmetrical. Whatever I do to one side, I'm going to do to the other. And then I'm going to follow this curve and follow that curve. So we've just got some more details there. There's a thick line of paint here, so I'm going to go ahead and smooth that out. And then I'm going to go ahead and clean this out. Now again, when we do this next part, make sure wherever you grab the canvas from, that you are not grabbing a wet spot. I can tell some of my dots are still wet here, so I want to be really cautious with where I grab. And anytime you grab, you want to be cautious with if there's any wet paint on your hands, because you don't want to paint something a color that you didn't need to. And now we're going to work with this tiny brush. Now again, I'm going to take a little bit of water here, and I'm going to add it to my black so that it thins it out, so that it makes it glide a lot easier. So we're going to work in some small spaces with some lines here. Now again, for how much black you're using, it depends on how much water you have. So if you only have a very tiny bit of black, make sure you have the tiniest bit of water. And then make sure when you're adding water that you really, really mix it in really good here. I'm going to dry off my brush, make sure there's no hidden water anywhere so it doesn't give me any hard times. And then what I'm going to work on is I'm going to put a couple little dots up here, and I'm going to work on the details of his body. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use just the tip. Add just black, just to the very tip of the brush. And I'm going to put a little circle up here, and a little circle up here. And then, again, just using the tip, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do 2 little eyes just like that. You don't want to press hard. You want to try and make them the same size. And I'm going to very carefully put some on the tip, but I'm going to wipe a little bit off even. And I'm going to make a little smile. Now when I do this, I am not pressing hard. Very carefully. Okay? And then another little tip again. And I'm going to put 3 very, very small dots. I don't want them to be confused with the eyes on each side, like that. And then I'm going to keep going down the sides of his body. Trying to keep them in line here with each other, but they don't have to be perfect. Like that. And then last but not least, I'm going to turn my canvas because that's going to make this part easier for me. And I am going to make these crisscross first of all, like that. And then his upper body is going to get just a couple small lines like this. And his lower body will get the same thing but a little bit less. They'll get pretty tiny towards the bottom there, like that. And then as always, we're going to look at our painting. We're going to see if we want anything touched up. We're going to go in and touch anything up. We're going to make sure all of our edges are the way that we want. And then we are going to clean out our brushes to make sure that they are ready to be used for next time.